The Return of Collector Diary book haul. Most of this I got from Bob in Dorset. If you look on the channel recently, there have been a couple of dealer visits to a guy called Bob in Dorset. I'll put the email up on the screen. He hasn't got a website yet. He's been buying and dealing for years. Really nice guy, involved with British fandom, small press publishing, amazing stories, lovely chap. And I visited Jules Burgess as well. So altogether, Jules has done one video, I've done two, and there will be more coming up where we actually look at Bob's collection, which is just fantastic. But it's a book haul, various things. First of all, you'll have seen in the Grumpy Old Men video about obscure SF that we looked at William Sloane. This is the New York Review of Books NYRB Classics omnibus version of those two novels, and it comes under the title of The Rim of Morning. And interestingly, something was rustling in the background, and oh god, the horror's entering the hideout. It's just a bag. It's one of my book bags. And yeah, so that's that. Very beautiful, as you can see. Now, I got this from Amazon UK because I don't think this is distributed in the UK normally. It's a stateside one. But I have to say, I mean, this is the trouble with buying books from Amazon. There's the edges and things. Look at that. And it's such a shame because they're so beautiful, but it's got a big ding down there. But you know what I mean. So there we go. $18.99, so quite pricey, but it is two novels in there, so actually it's pretty good when you think about it. So at some point, I've been meaning to read this for years, so I'm glad to get that. So we'll pop that there. We'll do hardbacks first, just to talk through these books. The average price that I paid for them, I averaged it out, was £6 each. Okay, now that's an average price. So obviously some were more, some were less. I got a lot of them from Honest Bob, as I say, and that gives you an idea. Now, he did give me a substantial discount. He gave me a 20% discount, and he bought me lunch at some point as well. So, you know, we can't really sort of argue with that. So you might not get as good a deal, but his prices are excellent and the quality is there. So we'll just go through them now. I've just got them arranged in their sort of formats, really, and talking from the top down. And this is something I've wanted for a while. An early Haldeman. It's the early ones I think are the best ones, the ones I like the most. And this is All My Sins Remembered in McDonald Janes. Janes, of course, the sort of aircraft reference. And McDonald, Futura, Orbit, you know, the SF imprint. This is from the late 70s. And lovely little hardcover there, little sort of, what is it? Is it a demi? Yeah, it's an octavo. So there you go. So yeah, very, very nice. And obviously, if most of us have read the Forever War, there's two texts of Forever War. If you haven't read it, it's a great entry-level book for SF. Particularly if you've seen lots of SF cinema, because it's one of the few science fiction novels which is a modern classic, which is actually, you know, this sort of, you could say it influenced things like Aliens and what have you, Starship Troopers, the film version. And obviously it's connected to Starship Troopers because it's a military SF novel. So this one as well. Very pleased with that. Wanted that for a while. Most of the copies out there are in a total state, and Bob did say to me, you won't find many like that, and he's absolutely right. So I'm really pleased with that one. So that's that. Something else I picked up. This is I Shudder at Your Touch. And I put this in a thumbnail, either a thumbnail or a sort of photo inset in one of my previous visits to Bob. And this is Seven House. And I am a bit of a Seven House collector. They're still an extant publisher. A lot of the books they did really were aimed for libraries. And I think they pretty much still are, you know, but they sort of tack along. And they did some great stuff in the 80s. A lot of their books are really rare. They did also Philip K. Dick, Philip Jose Farmer, all sorts of things. And I've got loads of them. I love them. And this is an anthology. I can't think who did the paperback, because they didn't do paperbacks then. They do some now. They would license them on. And this is from, let's have a look at the date, 92. First published by Penguin Books 91. So yeah, maybe they did it afterwards. I'm not sure. Maybe it's Penguin USA. I can't recall. But I only remember this in paperback. And it's got lots of great writers in it. Stephen King, Ruth Rendell, Clive Barker, Stephen Dawson. Well, are they great writers? I think Clive has his moments. Stephen King has his moments. And lots of other interesting people in here. Michael Blumlein, Patrick McGrath, the key figure of the New Gothic. Back then, Jonathan Carroll, Tom Dish, Robert Aikman, Christopher Fowler, who died recently, sadly, Hugh B. Cave, who was sort of big collector and sort of book expert in the sort of horror field, Angela Carter. This is basically, I think it was sold in the paperback as stories of sex and horror, or of sensuality and horror. So, you know, would you make a horror book yellow? I love that. I mean, I love the old school livery of that. It's just great. It takes me back to those days. So that's I Shudder at Your Touch. So it's got a double meaning. and I always thought at the time I should buy it and I never got around to it. So that goes in my anthologies collection, which is nice. So there you go. Then we come on to a book which is in all the reference books. I hadn't seen a copy for many years. It's much more famous in the States than it is over here, and it's in print from NESFA, New England Science Fiction Association, who do wonderful, wonderful books. And they're a fan group, and they're real hardcore fans. So they're part of SF fandom in the sort of traditional sense. And yeah, they're the sort of guys who say SF, I'm afraid. It is what it is. This is Silverlock by John Myers, which is a fantasy novel, big chunky one. And when does this date to? It's got like a little... There's a sort of slip in here as well, which is like sort of their version of an AI sheet, which is a lot more simple than what you get from a regular publisher. It's got a map. Oh no. And what did Christopher Priest say? I hate books with maps in them. It's also got the Silverlock Companion. This is 2004 edition. And when did it first come out? This is a very long time ago. Let's see. Anyway, it's a long time ago. You have to look because it's not yielding it. I can't remember. And I can't remember whether or not I put this in 100 must-read fantasy novels. As you can see, brilliant levels of preparation. But Silverlock, it's a real sort of one-off, and it's a chunky one. There's no sequels. Yay. So there you go. So Silverlock, look it up. It's an interesting one. Maybe I'll do something about that when I reread it. But we shall come to that at another point. Right. What else have we got? Well, the next book is by somebody who was a bit of a gateway writer for me. I am going to do a Books That Made Me part 2, because I realised I left some stuff out and I wanted to go into other areas beyond SF as well, just to give you a bit more of my sort of background and what have you in reading and what formed my tastes and things, and maybe some things you want to try yourself. And I saw this, and this particular writer, he did one thing. He did a few other things, but he mostly did one thing, and he did it over and over again. He had this basic theme, which was don't mess with technology and science because it'll bite you in the backside. Okay, it's dangerous to be too out there with science. And that's one of the basic messages of SF a lot of the time. It is the business of the future to be dangerous, as Alfred North Whitehead said. Now, this was made into a film, and I think it was late 90s, early in the century. I remember going to see it, and it was really gonzoid. And I was sitting there with my partner, the video widow, Pat, and I remember thinking, she must think I'm bonkers wanting to come to see this. I've not read the book. I've read other books by him. He's a very, very famous writer, sadly no longer with us. And this is Congo by Michael Crichton. Look at that jacket. Isn't that fantastic? I love this typeface. It screams rollerball. It screams Logan's Run. It screams the 1970s. And I was a kid in the 1970s, and I make no apology. I love the 70s. I would go back tomorrow. People say, well, wasn't it terrible? It was this, it was that, it was the other. For me, and I mean, in Britain, I think it was a great time. People say it was strikes, 3-day week, whatever. But that was the point when ordinary people, the sort of wealth gap between the poorest and the richest in this country was as narrowest. It was a revolutionary time, and it was a very rich time culturally as well. Great things happening in all of the arts. It really, really was. It was a time of change as well. You know, it really was important stuff. So this is Congo, and it's about a gorilla who's called Congo, and he's kind of super intelligent. And this is in Allen Lane, which is a Penguin hardcover. Now, I talked about imprints a while ago. So Penguin, of course, is a paperback publisher. So their first key main hardcover imprint, Jules Burgess will correct me if I'm wrong, was Allen Lane, because Allen Lane was the founder of Penguin. In the 80s, they started buying up smaller independent hardcover houses like Michael Joseph, Hamish Hamilton. They all come under the Penguin banner eventually. So that's Congo. Now, I couldn't resist this because his feel. There's Mr. Crichton on the back giving it the cheesy grin. He was very tall apparently, and he was a doctor, wasn't he? So there you go. But yeah, I'm going to sort of revisit him when I do Books That Made Me Too and talk about the book of his which let me in. It wasn't Jurassic Park because I'm much, much older than that. So yeah, I've never read that, so I'm sure that'll be a laugh and he'll be wagging the finger at us in that. But lovely, lovely book. So that's one of my nostalgia buys, very, very much so. And Congo, it goes there on Pride of Place in the podium. Then a hardcover novel by one of my favourite writers. I've got some books by him in hardcover. This is one of his key books, and you don't see them very often. They're nearly always in a state. They were very rarely given the gold star, treatment in terms of design and presentation. This is Herowitz World by Barry N. Malzberg. See the guys sort of facing the type there, and this is fantastic. I've got Barry's email address. So I'm going to get in touch with him because I'd love to meet him. I probably never will, but he's a grim sort of guy. Random House, US hardcover and first. These are all firsts unless I say they're not. This is fantastic. I covered it in the Mrbook video. This is about the inner turmoil and existential angst of a science fiction writer who doesn't want to be a science fiction writer. He wanted to have a career as a serious literary artist instead of being a pulp hack. And it's about what happens to him at a convention. It's about fan sex. It's about exploitation of the audience and the author, both sides. And it contains all of Barry's boiling ire about the way he felt he was treated in the SF world by publishers, by readers, reviewers, what have you. It's very grim. It does have SF elements, so it's recursive SF. It's SF about SF. It's not just that sort of literary thing. It is a science fiction novel as well, and that's just genius. And it's one of his keynote books. So if you ever see Herowitz World, it was published by Arrow in the UK. Barry's books used to be really easy to pick up secondhand. They're disappearing now because his star is rising, and I'm glad to contribute to that because I think he's a genius. Talk about American SF back in the 60s, and obviously Philip K. Dick looms large, but also the Silverberg dish. Mrbook comes in late in the 60s. Genius, absolutely brilliant. So I'm really pleased with that because it's nice to sort of add some things to my Barry pile. What else do we have? Well, let's get Congo there. Get this here, and this is Philip Jose Farmer, Doc Savage, His Apocalyptic Life. This isn't a first, this is a reissue. This is like the definitive edition. This came out after he died. It was curated by friends of his who've added extra material and collaborators, and it is signed by a few of them. Let's have a look. So there you go, signed by a load of people who put extra stuff in. And I used to have a first of this, which was Doubleday, I think. I bought it at the Worldcon, and I sold it on years and years ago, so I really didn't like the cover, and I've got a nice sort of Panther paperback. And this, of course, is his biography of Philip Jose Farmer, and it's part of the Wold Newton sequence. There is a video about the Wold Newton sequence on the channel. Do watch it because it's fascinating stuff. Farmer's best work. Really pleased with that because I think that's lovely. Pride of Place. We are going through this a bit more quickly today because I have a bus to catch in about 25 minutes. So I've got to go and take some books in to a bookshop in town and sell them and give some to charity. So I'm wheeling and dealing. Also got the post office, post some eBay stuff. So it's just a little chores today and videos in between. So this is something I came across at Bob's. Never seen it before, and I don't think I've heard about it. And this is Thomas Tryon, The Night of the Moonbow. There we go. And this is from about 1990, Howden Stoughton, UK. Thomas Tryon was an actor, and he gets mentioned in folk horror circles. He did a book called Harvest Home, which is kind of like an American folk horror thing. And before that, he did a book called The Others, which is about two twins who are malign. There's a film of it. It's in NYRB Classics again. I have read it. I didn't get on with it enormously. I want to give it another try because I think my attention was divided. Look at that little map as well. It says camp friend indeed, glad men from happy boys. So maybe scouting's involved. Set in 1938, halcyon word of childhood, Bible camp. Okay, so yeah, there we go. Now I say he was an actor. What was he in? After a notable career as an actor on the stage and television films, climaxed by his award-winning performance in The Cardinal, he retired from acting to concentrate on writing. The Other was published in 1971. I seem to think he was in something like Return of the Fly. Not Return. Is it Return of the Fly? There's the original Fly. Then there's the Return of the Fly. But I think maybe that's Brett Halsey instead. I'm not sure. I can't think what he's in, but I look it up and I'll stick it on the screen because he was in at least one genre film of note. The video widow is away, and I'm doing lots of shooting this week, lots of ideas I want to squeeze in, and because she's away, I've been able to clear some things out the hideout, pop them into the bedroom by the side of the bed because she doesn't have to go to bed because she's not there, which has given me more room to shoot, which is great, and it also means I can access the books quickly. So I'm trying to cram a load in this week. So it's a holiday, but it's a outlaw bookseller working YouTube holiday as ever. Will he ever take a proper holiday, you ask yourself? Who knows? Lucius Shepard, The Golden. This is the UK edition from Millennium. Bob did have the Zeissing one, which is really nice. There's a review slip in there. So if you want a copy of The Golden, he's got a Zeissing one. Just get in touch with him. Now, this came out in, let's see, 1994? 93. by this point, I'd got off with Shepard, and I don't mean I'd sort of met him at a party and we had a dalliance. And that's a British usage there. I'd gone off him, right, because I sort of I got off with him. I'd gone off him because he did. The first 4 books are all set in jungles, and they're really good. But I felt Kalamantan, which was the 4th of them, didn't quite come up to speed. He was getting a bit too diffuse to me, so I decided to step back, and later on I wish I'd kept up with them. And also, this is the point, 93 is at the point where I really stepped back from SF big time for about 7 or 8 years. And so I've been meaning to pick this up for ages. Not a difficult book to get. It's about vampires, which is a tired old trope now, but of course the people who can write really well do it well, so I'm looking forward to that. Read that at some point. To finish the hardcovers for today, we return to our old favourite, the man who, I know I do a lot of videos about him, but it's because my enthusiasm for him has returned, hugely. And this is Robert Silverberg, and this is Sailing to Byzantium. And this is the Underwood Miller edition. Underwood Miller, fantastic limited edition publisher, 70s, 80s, 90s, tons of Jack Vance, signed books, trade limited editions. They fetch lots and lots of money, the Vance ones. They're always beautifully produced. And I did have contact with one of the guys at Underwood Miller once by correspondence back in the 90s. And this looked more like a fantasy Silverberg. It was like a novella. I think it was a tour, not a tour double, something like that. So I'm not sure I'll get on with it because I'm not so keen on the more fantasy type ones. Nightwings is SF, but it's got a very airy fantasy feel. Similarly, Lord Valentine's Castle. So we'll see. But I love Sailing to Byzantium as a title. And what a beautiful book. You can't really go wrong with that, can you? So I'm going to pop it in pride of place on the podium there. Just do some rearranging of these hardcovers and trades. And we'll move on to A format paperbacks. Recently, again, Graham and I talked about Daniel F. Galou, or Galoy, who knows? How do you actually pronounce his name? Answers on a postcard, please. It's difficult. You've still got to read it. You know what it is. Lords of the Psychon, with a 3 shilling sticker on. So that dates back to at least, let's see, it would have been February 71 at the latest. This is Bantam 1963, and I think that's a later sticker. And of course, Bantam, there was a UK Bantam, but this is US Bantam, so that's the UK sticker stuck on there, and a very livid red that. Because I can't find my copy of Dark Universe, I think it went in the wrong box, I bought a fresh one, and that's really, really nice cover. It does have a slightly leaning spine, which I'm a bit peeved about, but other than that, really good. I might try and pick up another copy just as a reading one. It was an SF book club book, horrible white jacket, but I might try and get one of those because I do like the jacket of that. The cover's fantastic, isn't it? So I'm just going to pop that there for you to feast your eyes on. Somebody I've mentioned many times on the channel, he said checking his watch, just in case make sure he's not late, and who I revere deeply is the very wonderful Barrington J. Bailey, the dark master of British space opera and pulp forms. And this is the Pillars of Eternity in Door. Lovely yellow spine and the yellow text block, fantastic. And as Moorcock says, most original writer of his generation. If you like M. John Harrison, you'd love Bailey. If you like Brian Stableford's space operas, you'd love him. If you like sort of that sort of fast-moving Baroque thing, Bester's an influence, big influence, very sort of colourful language and, sort of burning resentment in characters and what have you. I do have this in a pan omnibus, which contains this and The Garments of Sayan, which is in 100 Must-Read Science Fiction Novels. Is my favourite Bailey. But I've not actually read this one, so it's a real delight to have a Bailey I haven't read. Isn't that cracking? Fantastic. And yeah, I've got it in the omnibus, but I'd much rather read it in a singleton there. There we are. Bailey's books are getting harder to find. There are a couple I haven't got, and they're just like nowhere. It's really getting to me. Then we have, this needs a bit of a clean. This is an uncommon Penguin Modern Classic. This is a livery which dates back to the 70s, and this is Carol Capek, Apocryphal Stories. Capek, of course, wrote RUR, Russell's Universal Robots, and The War with the Newts, The Insect Play. Czech dramatist, writer, novelist, and this was published in Prague after the Second World War, and he was dead at this point, and it's all sorts of vignettes and stories. They'll be more like sort of fabulations than SF. They've got things like the comments of a Jewish baker on Christ's miracle of 5 loaves, how probable it was that Alexander the Great should pen a hard luck story to Aristotle, so on, stuff like that. So it's classical sources and things in there. So, and it's got Max Ernst, Europe After the Rain, a detail from that on the cover, which is a picture which often pops up on old Ballard editions. Lovely, and I love the old green livery. This is what they were like when I started buying them, so great stuff. Very pleased with that. Delaney. Recently I was thinking about Delaney, and the Delaney video popped up last week, and funnily enough, Matt at Bookpilled reviewed the Einstein intersection, which I know as A Fabulous Formless Darkness, which is Delaney's preferred title. And, you know, he said some very interesting things, and Delaney, I mean, the proper Delaney video is yet to come from me. Now, my copy of this book is in a little A format paperback omnibus, which I bought way back in the sort of mid 80s on import. I got it one of the import shops in London. Maybe I got it from Forever People in Bristol, I can't recall. And it's called The Complete Nebula Award winning fiction of Samuel R. Delaney. It's quite uncommon. It's got Babel 17 in it, because that one Nebula Award best novel. It's got this in it, because this won the Nebula Award. It's got I and Gomorrah, my favourite story by Delaney, and Time Considered as a Helix of Semi-Precious Stones. Again, a very famous Delaney story. And this one is interesting. So I wanted it with the Einstein intersection on the cover, and I particularly like this one. It's Sphere. I do like Sphere stuff a lot, and this is from the 70s. And it's actually late 60s, this edition. Now I look at the back, I can tell at a glance because of the old money, the pre-decimal money is there. And this is set in the future when mankind, I can't recall, is either extinct or departed the Earth, and they're no longer around, and aliens have appeared. And to try and understand the remnants of human civilization, they take on the personas of mythic figures, you know, from mythology, from popular culture, what have you, and they recreate the sort of bodies, or create the bodies if they're fictional ones, because they're fictional ones as well. And so there's a kind of farmer thing there in a way, and it's kind of Zelazny thing, like Lord of Light. And I do see similarities between early Zelazny and Delaney in the poetry of them. But Delaney, I think, is far more sophisticated as a prose stylist, even though Roger did some amazing stuff, particularly early on. So, and that's nice stuff, because I'm going to reread this, because it's been a very long time. It's generally regarded as being one of his least successful books, over ambitious. And could it just be, and I think Matt said this as well, that, you know, you need to be quite an advanced reader to get into it. And I read it when I was relatively young, and I was impressed by it, but at the same time frustrated. So we shall see. So that's going to be a reread at some point, and I'll let you know what I think when that comes around, because it's I am revisiting Delaney slowly. I reviewed Jules Vaptor on the channel a while ago. That was the second time I'd read that, so we'll see. John Brenner, how much of a Brenner completist do I want to be? You know, there's loads and loads of it out there. I do like his work. I just decided to buy the ones that appeal, really, and I've wanted this one for a while because I love the cover. I do need to give this a clean. This is Hamlin. I love Hamlin SF from the 70s and early 80s, and this is More Things in Heaven. Very traditional looking book, nice and fleet and sharp and short. Absolutely beautiful, lovely, really great. So that's partially a nostalgia buy there, because I'm allowed to be nostalgic. I'm an old guy, you know, I'm on the way out as it is. And then I was really pleased to come across this. This is one that I haven't researched this yet. It's one that I didn't have. I've never read, and I'm wondering whether this is a variant title. I don't think it is. I'm not certain, but I'll check that and I'll put it on the screen if it is. And that's The Time Wanderers by the Strugatsky brothers. And this is a, let's have a look, St. Martin's Press paperback, and chosen by New York Times of the best books of 1987. So there you go. So that was the year I met the Strugatsky brothers at the Worldcon. There you go, fantastic stuff. The Time Wanderers, there we are. So that's a fairly obscure one. I know nothing about it until I've researched it. I've almost certainly seen it on a list there. And, you know, as always fascinating, the Strugatskys. And it's great to see them become more and more popular, because they're very challenging and unique and interesting. Right, Honest Bob Silverberg strikes again. Also, the anthologies kick strikes again. He did a series of anthologies called New Dimensions, and some of them were published in the UK by Gollancz in hardcover. Quite hard to get in good nick and quite expensive. And I am working on my Bob collection, and Gollancz Bobs in you know, very fine condition are hard to find, but I'm zeroing in on these things. A lot of them in the States, sadly, so I can't access them because the postage is so much. But we'll see about that. Maybe we'll cut some deals. And he edited these. This is New Dimensions 1. This picture on the cover, I'm sure that appeared on a Barry Malzberg book, maybe on Tactics of Conquest, something like that. I'll have to have a look. So yeah, anthologies, and this is where these are his new wave anthologies, and here's number 3. And I'm trying to pick all these up at some point. I don't have any of them. I've never got around to them. Very beautiful, and they'll go into part of my American New Wave collection. Great stuff. Then I bought a book by Philip K. Dick. I bought a book by Philip K. Dick for about 60 million years because I have everything. I've read everything. I've had it all for years. I tell a lie. I did buy a hardcover first, US hardcover first, of Puttering About in a Small Land, one of his mainstream novels recently, and I love Dick's mainstream novels. I've never owned this one. It's a short story collection. I've got everything in it. I've never seen a nice copy, and you know, it was there, and I thought I'll have it. And that's the Book of Philip K. Dick, one of Door's book of sort of best of series. Really, really nice, good nick, a bit spine faded, but yeah, I sort of felt, you know, I've got all the collections to say. I didn't have that one, so I thought really I should sort of pop that in there and continue my Dick completism, as they say. Silverberg again, short story collection, and Bob said to me, the lady on the front looks like Cher. And I thought of the Tubes, their song Madam I'm Adam, which is kind of a science fiction song from 1976 from a record called Young and Rich, one of my favourite albums. Amazing production. Ken Scott, who was an engineer on some of the Beatles stuff, and he did it. He also produced Hunky Dory for David Bowie, great man Ken Scott, and he wrote about it in his autobiography. But I'm digressing because I love the Tubes, especially at that stage. This is Moon, Ferns and Star Songs. Lots of stories in here I've read. They pop up in other collections, including things like, let's see, Song of Summer, Passengers, Night Wings. There's a few others in there. I'm less well read on Bob's short stories. I've pretty much read all the novels, all the SF novels between about 1960 and the late 70s. After that, I'm a bit patchier. But yeah, really nice. But I am sort of trying to buy all the SF I can find by Bob, because I do love his work, as you know. Then a good old Welsh boyo, a Welsh science fiction writer. You see, that's what my language used to be like. My accent used to be like before I moved down here to England, and you know, it got blunted by hanging out with the Anglophile sort of types. So anyway, this is Peter Tate, The Thinking Seat, and Peter Tate was a journalist from Cardiff. Really, really good. I like his stuff a lot, actually. And this is set in California, early 70s. It was written in the 60s about a desalination plant, of all things. Tone text block. I've never ever seen a Peter Tate paperback, but then I've only been collecting him sort of recently. Really, I've neglected him until now. So yes, pick that up. Great stuff. Sometimes quite a sort of didactic style, and not always accessible, but very, very good. I really enjoyed his work so far. Then a couple of upgrades. This is Chronicles by D.G. Compton. If you're a Compton fan, Bob's got 4 of these. He's got a signed one. Now, I've got some signed Compton, so I went for this because it was cheaper. My Arrow copy's in a total state. It's quite a common book. Sort of time travel thing. And D.G. Compton, the great moralist of British literary SF in the 60s and 70s, still alive. He's really old. Hasn't published anything since the late 80s, as far as I'm aware. This is an Ace science fiction special, and I do want to get this in hardcover, because the original title in hardcover, it was called something like The Smell of Aspirin's Hot Wireless Sets. I can't remember. A very long title, very, very strange, and I must pick one up because this is so nice. I almost don't want to read it. I want to reread it, so I'm going to keep my old Arrow one, which has got a broken spine, is in terrible state, and I might reread it soon, because I'm going to do a video about Compton, because nobody ever talks about him, and he's fantastic. Another D.G. Compton, another upgrade, Farewell Earth's Bliss, a downbeat tale of colonization, of living on Mars, and oh, it's, you know, it's really, really quite something. So if you like Philip K. Dick's Three Stigmata, you like this. If you like Mars books, I really recommend it. I think I mentioned it in my top 5 or top 10, top 5 Mars novels, which is a video that nobody's watched. Not very good quality, but there you go. But yeah, this is great as well. So, and I must try and get these in hardcover, because I love Compton. I've got a bit in hardcover, but I am a sort of completist of his SF. He also wrote crime novels as Guy Compton. He also wrote Gothics as well. Really, really good. His most famous book is The Continuous Catherine Mortenhoe, aka The Unsleeping Eye in the States, which was filmed as Death Watch, and we'll do something about that soon. Then a book with a title that's always appealed to me. You know me, I'm a sucker for a good title. I have read this guy, I've not read this one. What Entropy Means to Me by George Alec Effinger. Geo here, George. What Entropy Means to Me. The Nebula nominee cult classic published by Bart, whoever Bart are. And this is sort of, this is 70s or 80s. I think this is a reissue. 72, reissued 89. And it's got a rather confusing blurb on the back. See, very minimalist. That's good. The title sold it to me. I've wanted one for quite a while. and it says a true classic of science fiction. Then above that there's a quote from Publishers Weekly that said should shake up the field of sword and sorcery fiction. So is it fantasy or is it SF? The title makes me think of SF, makes you think of New Wave, but we'll see, I guess. But yeah, not a bad little writer. When Gravity Fails is the big 80s one. That's a good one, like that one. Brenner, again, going for the things I like the sound of. I love the title of this book. This is a really beautiful Del Rey edition, and that's Players of the Games of People. The Game of People. Players of the Game of People. Absolutely lovely. Isn't that nice? Then we go back to one of the sort of stars of TV, the very wonderful Rod Serling, who did loads of TV writing, Night Gallery, and I think Rod Serling did Twilight Zone as well, didn't he? His name used to pop up all the time in the 60s. And so this is a tie-in. This is Rod Serling's Night Gallery, and this is prose retellings of some of the episodes in the TV series. Really, really good. And I've never read any prose by Serling, so I must watch that. So Night Gallery and Twilight Zone were very big in the 60s. They were more sort of dark fantasy and supernatural horror and weird as opposed to SF. There was the odd SF thing, so they were different. The Outer Limits, which was rather like Bug-Eyed Monster, Bem of the week. But yeah, really, really nice. I am getting more interested in film and TV tie-ins. It's Jules Burt's fault, you know. Then everything with collecting is Jules Burt's fault. He's a bad influence on me, but he's a good lad. Bob actually showed me this. He said, look at this, Steve, with a cover like that. And he actually gave it to me because I couldn't resist it. William F. Temple and the Fleshpots of Sansato in, let's see, NEL. This is a 60s book. And it's about a town of neon lights, gambling clubs and brothels. About a secret agent who has to find an eminent science with priceless knowledge and perverted taste and sexual enjoyment who's disappeared into this neon lit sort of night city zone. That rather reminds me of Dr. Ada by K.W. Jeter. What? You've never read Dr. Ada by K.W. Jeter? Come on, guys. There's a video on my channel about the Jeter book, which is called Outstandingly Weird. Watch it. It's not monetized because I'm slightly uncomfortable with some of the material that Jeter covers in the book. Not that I'm uncomfortable with the material, I'm uncomfortable with the idea of making money out of it. So it's not monetized, but do watch it. It's a fun video. I wear a nice shirt in it, actually. Then a book which I've had two previous editions of, a UK edition. I've also owned this edition before, and I don't know why I got rid of it. And I'm looking for a really nice hardcover copy. And again, I can't find a really nice one. They're out there. This is horror, and this is Dennis Etchison, Red Dreams. Look at that. And the UK edition just has that hand with a mouth on it, but not sort of an inset. It's a different piece of art. And yeah, isn't that fantastic? And this really sort of dangerous stuff in here. I remember there's this brilliant opening story, and it's signed. I remember this brilliant opening story, is it the opening one? About a sort of murderous dwarf who's also a writer, I seem to recall. And it's a while since I've read this. And it's an introduction by Carl Edward Wagner, the fantasy writer, the sword and sorcery writer, who everybody who watches, nearly not everybody, a lot of people from the States who watch my 10 best sword and sorcery classic fantasy thing, and it's a very popular video, my most popular video. It's a shame really because I don't do a lot of fantasy and I'm not really that interested, guys, sorry. I'll do a bit more at some point, I guess. You know, he does the introduction. Charles L. Grant likes it, which is good enough for me. Charles L. Grant started an SF writer, became a horror writer, really good. Red Dreams, lovely. Finally today, because my bus is due in 5 minutes, Crime Stories by August Derleth, the one of the Lovecraft Circle, the curator and creator, with a couple of other people, of Arkham House, the official publisher launched to preserve Lovecraft's legacy in hardcover. And this is his Sherlock Holmes pastiches, The Adventures of Solar Ponds. When Derleth was a small boy, he read and read and reread all the Holmes stories. He wrote to Conan Doyle and said, please, Mr. Doyle, you can do some more. And he had a nice letter back. But of course, Doyle stopped doing them. And so Derleth decided he would do his own when he was old enough. So he created Solar Ponds, who's rather like Sherlock Holmes. There's an edition of one of these books, as there are others, from Sarab Press in Wales. And they're really, really nice. They're very, very collectible, limited editions. And the painting on the cover, Solar Ponds, looks like Peter Cushing, which is obviously a reference to the Hammer version of Hound of the Baskervilles. So there you go. Bit of crime as well. I think that's that for now. The blue bus is calling us, as Jim Morrison said, so I have to make space now. And as the Merton Parkers, whoever they were, once sang, a man ain't a man with a ticket in his hand. Well, I'm sorry, I'll get a ticket and I'll be sitting down with a large pile of books heading into town to post them and sell them, what have you. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, comment, super thanks, whatever. Bye for now.